No babysitter lasted a week with the alien triplets until the poor cook did the impossible. The explosion that shattered every window on the second floor of the Thornfield ranch house at precisely 2:17 in the afternoon sent a mushroom cloud of purple smoke billowing across the Colorado Territory sky, while three identical voices raised in perfect harmony let out the kind of otherworldly shrieking that made every horse within 5 miles bolt in terror. From his position behind the overturned dining table where he had taken refuge, Jeremiah Thornfield watched his 19th babysitter in 6 months sprint across the yard toward her horse with her dress smoking and her hair standing on end like she had been struck by lightning. The 3 8-year-old children responsible for this latest domestic catastrophe appeared at the shattered window with expressions of innocent curiosity that would have been believable if not for the faint blue glow emanating from their pale gray eyes and the way their synchronized movements suggested telepathic coordination rather than normal sibling cooperation. Marcus, Helena, and Cassius Thornfield looked exactly like human children, except for the subtle wrongness that came from being only half human, their other half inherited from a father whose true origins lay among the stars rather than the prairies of the American frontier. "Papa," Helena called down in her sweet, melodious voice that carried harmonic undertones no human throat could produce. Miss Jennifer left her bag behind again. "Should we throw it down to her? Or would you prefer we use the matter displacement technique that made such interesting patterns on the barn roof last week?" Jeremiah closed his eyes and tried to summon the patience that 4 decades of galactic military service had supposedly taught him, though nothing in his experience commanding star cruisers and alien battalions had prepared him for the unique challenges of raising 3 hybrid children whose combined capabilities included telekinesis, molecular manipulation, limited precognition, and what appeared to be an inexhaustible creativity for finding new ways to terrify anyone foolish enough to accept employment as their caregiver. The problem was not malice. His children were fundamentally good-natured and had never intentionally harmed anyone. The problem was power without understanding, alien abilities manifesting in young minds that lacked the experience to predict the consequences of their actions. When Marcus tried to help with cooking by accelerating chemical reactions, he occasionally created small explosions. When Helena attempted to assist with cleaning by manipulating molecular bonds, furniture sometimes developed the consistency of liquid mercury. When Cassius offered to help with repairs by restructuring damaged materials, the results often resembled abstract art more than functional architecture. The succession of babysitters who had fled the ranch in various states of terror and confusion represented a comprehensive survey of available childcare in 3 counties. Mrs. Patterson had lasted 4 days before the children's attempt to help her bake cookies resulted in pastries that glowed in the dark and sang lullabies. Miss Rodriguez had endured nearly a week before Marcus's effort to speed up laundry day accidentally created a temporal loop that left her washing the same clothes for what felt like 17 hours. The redoubtable Mrs. O'Brien, who had raised 12 children of her own and claimed to be unflappable, had departed after just 2 days when Helena's attempt to paint her portrait resulted in an image that aged in real time and occasionally winked at observers. Standing in his smoke-filled parlor surrounded by furniture that would need to be replaced again, Jeremiah faced a crisis that threatened not just his domestic arrangements but his carefully maintained cover identity as a successful cattle rancher. The repeated departures of terrified employees were beginning to attract attention from neighbors and territorial authorities, and questions were being asked about the unusual number of small explosions, strange lights, and electromagnetic disturbances emanating from his property. More importantly, his children desperately needed proper care and education that could help them understand and control their extraordinary abilities. Without guidance, their powers would continue to manifest in unpredictable ways that could eventually expose their alien heritage to a human society that was nowhere near ready for such revelations. The answer to his prayers arrived the next morning in the form of Molly O'Reilly, a woman so impoverished that accepting a position as cook and general helper at a ranch with a reputation for supernatural disturbances seemed preferable to the alternatives available to a widow with no family and dwindling resources. She climbed down from the supply wagon that had brought her from the nearest town, carrying all her worldly possessions in a single battered carpet bag, and wearing a dress that had been mended so many times it was more patches than original fabric. But what Jeremiah's enhanced alien senses detected about Molly O'Reilly was not poverty or desperation. It was the unmistakable electromagnetic signature of someone whose genetic structure included modifications that no human DNA should have possessed. She was not entirely human any more than he was, though her alien heritage was so deeply buried and carefully hidden that even she might not have been aware of its existence. Molly's first encounter with the triplets occurred 20 minutes after her arrival, when she entered the kitchen to assess the culinary situation and found the three children conducting what appeared to be a chemistry experiment involving flour, eggs, and forces that were causing ingredients to hover in midair, while combining according to patterns that defied conventional physics. Instead of screaming and running like the previous 18 caregivers, Molly calmly set down her bag, rolled up her sleeves, and said in a voice that carried just enough authority to get their attention, "Well now, that's an interesting approach to making breakfast. But I think we might get better results if we combined your energy manipulation with some traditional cooking techniques. What do you say we work together and see what we can create?" The three children stopped their aerial food preparation and stared at Molly with the kind of focused attention they had never given any previous adult. For the first time in their young lives, they were being addressed by someone who looked at their abilities and saw possibilities rather than problems. Someone who spoke to them as if their powers were tools to be mastered rather than disasters to be prevented. What followed was perhaps the most unusual cooking lesson in the history of the American frontier, as Molly guided the triplets through breakfast preparation that incorporated both traditional culinary skills and carefully controlled alien abilities. Marcus learned to use his molecular acceleration to create perfect temperature control rather than explosive reactions. Helena discovered that her matter manipulation could create precisely measured ingredients and perfectly mixed batters. Cassius found that his structural modification abilities could shape bread and pastries with artistic precision while maintaining their edibility. The breakfast they created together was not just delicious, but displayed a harmony of human tradition and alien innovation that impressed even Jeremiah's sophisticated palate. More importantly, the children had experienced their first successful collaboration with an adult, their first lesson in using their powers constructively rather than destructively. But Molly's real breakthrough came that afternoon, when she made the decision that would transform not just the children's behavior, but their understanding of their own nature and potential. Instead of trying to suppress or redirect their alien abilities, she began teaching them to understand the scientific principles behind their powers and to take pride in capabilities that made them special rather than problematic. She started with simple lessons about energy and matter, concepts that the children's enhanced intelligence could grasp far more easily than normal 8-year-olds would have managed. She explained how Marcus's molecular acceleration worked at the atomic level, helping him understand why some reactions produced heat while others created light or motion. She taught Helena about the electromagnetic forces that allowed her to manipulate molecular bonds, showing her how to predict and control the outcomes of her interventions. For Cassius, she provided instruction in structural engineering principles that helped him understand how materials behaved under different conditions and how to modify them in ways that enhanced, rather than destroyed, their functionality. But more than technical knowledge, she gave all three children something they had never experienced before: genuine appreciation for their unique gifts and confidence that they could learn to use them wisely. The transformation in the children's behavior was immediate and dramatic. The random explosions, uncontrolled molecular disruptions, and structural modifications that had terrorized previous caregivers virtually disappeared as the triplets learned to channel their abilities through understanding rather than impulse. Their powers didn't diminish, but they became focused and purposeful rather than chaotic and unpredictable. Jeremiah watched in amazement as his children evolved from uncontrollable forces of nature into young beings who could contribute positively to household operations while developing the self-discipline that would be essential for their future integration into galactic society. Under Molly's guidance, they learned not just control, but creativity, finding ways to use their abilities that enhanced their environment rather than disrupting it. But Molly's greatest achievement was not technical training, but emotional development. For the first time in their lives, the triplets had a caregiver who celebrated their differences rather than fearing them, someone who saw their alien heritage as a source of strength and possibility, rather than a burden to be hidden or overcome. The bond that formed between Molly and the children transcended the normal relationship between caregiver and charges. She became their advocate, their teacher, and their guide into understanding not just their powers but their place in a universe that was far larger and more complex than the frontier world where they were growing up. As weeks passed and the children's development accelerated under Molly's nurturing guidance, Jeremiah began to suspect that her success was due to more than just patience and understanding. His enhanced senses detected subtle indicators that suggested Molly's own genetic modifications were responding to the children's alien energies, awakening capabilities that had been dormant since her birth. The truth about Molly's heritage emerged gradually through conversations that revealed knowledge and insights no purely human individual should have possessed. Her understanding of energy manipulation, molecular bonding, and structural modification went far beyond what could be learned from books or observation. She possessed intuitive grasp of principles that even Jeremiah's advanced alien education had required years to master. The revelation that Molly was herself part alien, descendant of a previous generation of off-world visitors who had integrated into human society, explained both her immediate acceptance of the children's abilities and her remarkable success in teaching them control and purpose. She was not just a caregiver, but a bridge between their alien heritage and their human environment, someone who could help them understand both aspects of their dual nature. But Molly's greatest test came when territorial investigators arrived to look into reports of unusual phenomena at the Thornfield Ranch. The federal agents who appeared at the door were not ordinary law enforcement, but specialized investigators whose mission was to identify and contain any threats to human security that might arise from unexplained supernatural activity. The interview that followed required Molly to demonstrate the full extent of her capabilities and commitment to protecting the children she had come to love as her own. Working with Jeremiah, she created elaborate explanations for the various phenomena that had been observed, attributing them to experimental agricultural techniques, unusual geological conditions, and the kind of frontier ingenuity that produced surprising innovations in isolated locations. But more importantly, she coordinated with the children to provide a demonstration of carefully controlled abilities that impressed the investigators without revealing the true extent of their powers or their alien origins. The triplets, under her guidance, presented themselves as remarkably gifted human children, whose unusual talents could be explained as exceptional intelligence combined with creative problem-solving skills. The successful deception established the ranch as an innovative but ultimately harmless operation that posed no threat to human society. The investigators departed satisfied that they had found nothing more dangerous than a family of exceptionally intelligent settlers whose experiments in applied science occasionally produced unusual but explainable results. The months that followed proved that Molly had achieved something that no amount of money or authority could have accomplished. She had given 3 powerful young beings the foundation they needed to grow into responsible adults who could use their extraordinary gifts in service of others, rather than as sources of chaos and destruction. Under her continuing guidance, the triplets developed into model frontier children who contributed positively to their community, while secretly preparing for futures that would eventually take them beyond Earth's boundaries to serve as bridges between human and alien civilizations. Their powers continued to grow, but always within frameworks of understanding and responsibility that ensured they would use their abilities wisely. Jeremiah's gratitude to Molly extended far beyond mere domestic convenience. She had given him something he had begun to fear was impossible: children who could embrace both their human and alien heritage while developing into beings who would make positive contributions to whatever civilization they chose to serve. The poor cook who had accepted a desperate position caring for uncontrollable children had accomplished what trained specialists and experienced caregivers had failed to achieve. She had looked beyond the surface chaos to see the potential for greatness that lay within 3 young beings, whose extraordinary gifts needed only proper understanding and guidance to become sources of wonder rather than terror. Years later, as Molly watched the triplets demonstrate their abilities to visiting galactic dignitaries who had come to assess Earth's readiness for formal contact with interstellar civilization, she reflected on the day when she had first encountered 3 children whose powers seemed beyond any possibility of control or direction. The impossible thing she had accomplished was not suppressing their abilities or hiding their nature, but helping them understand that being different was not a burden to be endured, but a gift to be celebrated and shared with others who could benefit from their unique perspectives and capabilities. The babysitters who had fled in terror had seen only the chaos and destruction that uncontrolled power could create. But Molly had seen 3 children who needed someone to believe in their potential for greatness, and her faith in them had been rewarded with the joy of watching them grow into exactly the kind of beings the universe needed, powerful enough to make a difference, wise enough to use their abilities responsibly, and compassionate enough to dedicate their gifts to helping others rather than serving only themselves. The cook, who had been poor in material possessions, had proven rich in the qualities that mattered most: understanding, patience, wisdom, and the kind of love that saw potential where others saw only problems. Her success with the alien triplets had demonstrated that sometimes the most important qualifications for caring for extraordinary children were not professional training or extensive experience, but simply the courage to see their gifts as blessings and the commitment to help them learn to use those blessings well.